On this week's episode of the podcast, All There Is with Anderson Cooper, Anderson looks at anticipatory grief and talks about the process of slowly losing his beloved nanny, May McClendon, to Alzheimer's disease.
Watching her decline, watching all the dreams I'd had of giving her a house or having her live with me when I had kids one day, watching all that disappear was like nothing I'd ever experienced. It was a different kind of grief, different than my mom, different than my dad, different than my brother. After a time, May stopped speaking words. When I'd visit, she still knew who I was, but she'd open her mouth and the only sound that came out was a single note, like she was singing. Ah, ah.
And Anderson is with us now, along with Sebastian, who we're so happy to have him come back again with us. Hi, buddy. Anderson, it's so moving. And I know so many people who have lost someone slowly like this are going to appreciate you giving voice to this process for them. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this concept of anticipatory grief?
Yeah, I actually had never heard the term before, and a filmmaker named Kirsten Johnson, who I interview in this episode of the podcast, she's the one who mentioned it in an incredible film she did called Dick Johnson is Dead, about her father. She lost her mom to Alzheimer's in 2007. Her father now struggles with dementia. We actually talked to him during the interview as well. But it's this idea, and I think it's anybody who's lost a loved one to dementia or Alzheimer's, who's dealing with that, or any terminal illness. It's the idea of seeing the gradual decline, the disappearance of somebody before your eyes. And it's that anticipating what is to come. It's not going to necessarily get any better. It's going to be this drawn out thing. And so you're already anticipating their death. You're anticipating being without them in your life. And yet they're still there in front of you. It's a particular kind of grief. And it's obviously very, very difficult to deal with. And it's nice, when people talk about it, and to know that you are not the first person who's gone down this road.
I never heard of that concept either until you mentioned it just now. Sort of like a horror movie where it's not the loud noise that's the worst. It's knowing that it's going to come, that I think tears you up the most inside. We have a clip of your conversation with that filmmaker, Kirsten Johnson. Let's listen.
One of the classic stories I tell is him waking up in the middle of the night, extremely worried that a patient is downstairs. And I can't convince him logically that the patient is not there. So then I go downstairs with him. Then what happens? He looks around. He's like, there's no patient. And he's like, oh, you were right. And then he says, it must be incredibly difficult to watch your father lose his mind.
Wow. So he's had the self-awareness of what was happening to him.
Yes, that would go in and out. But when it was in, it's like a knife in your heart.
Wow. And Anderson, you said one of the reasons she was so great to talk to is she talked to you about the importance of being able to get to know someone even after they die. What does she mean by that?
Yeah, this is a concept to me which kind of blew my mind, and I just think it's so important, and it can give hope to so many people. It's this idea that your relationship, just death is not the end of your relationship with that person. And I know maybe that sounds like too sort of out there, but when you think about it, you will continue to have a relationship with the person who's died. I continue to have a relationship with May McClendon, this nanny I had for 15 years, who was really a mother to me, as close to me as my mom and my dad. And I stayed involved in her life for the rest of her life, even after she no longer was my nanny. But my relationship with her changes. Having children, having my kids, I understand May in a different way than I did before. I know what she was doing when she was caring for me. I see her in a different way. And Kirsten was talking about that. And I think that's a really important idea, that you can get to know somebody even after they're gone. You can get to know them in a deeper way by reading something that they wrote, or going through their things, or as you evolve, as I become a 55-year-old man, I can better understand what my mom went through when she lost her husband, my dad, when she was 50, or when When I can understand things as a parent about my parents that I didn't understand before. So even they're no longer present, they are still very present in your life, and your relationship with them evolves. And to me, that's a really hopeful thing, because it means that that love that you have, that bond that you have, it's obviously different and you wish they were there, but it evolves, and you can still talk to them and have a relationship with them and understand them in a new and deeper way.
Anderson, what kind of reaction have you been getting to this incredible series?
Yeah, it's been really extraordinary. I mean, it's been overwhelming. I've received, I can't tell you how many thousands of direct messages from people on Instagram, which is sort of generally the way I communicate on social media at all. And it's just been incredibly deep messages of people telling me about the losses they've experienced and how they've dealt with it, and what they're taking from the podcast and ideas for the podcast. And it's just, there is an ocean of loss and an ocean of grief. This is the most universal of human experiences. Someone DM'd me today saying, like, we all talk about birth and talk about that freely. We don't talk about end of life. We don't talk about death and loss as freely. And I think this is a conversation a lot of people would like to have, because not having it doesn't make it go away. Not having it only makes you feel just more lonely and isolated, as I have felt for a long time.
So true. It is so important what you're doing, Anderson, and I'm so glad that we get to talk about this with you this morning. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us.
My pleasure.
And
Sure, my
Sebastian,
pleasure.
as always. See you later, bud.
very
And be
mellow.
sure he's so cool about this always. You can be sure to check out the latest episode of All There Is with Anderson Cooper, available now wherever you get your podcasts, or you can just scan the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a second with your phone to find the podcast.